Once upon a time, in the vibrant heart of Lagos, there lived a young woman named Amara. At 25, she was a university dropout, working tirelessly as a waitress in a bustling restaurant to pay for her mother's mounting hospital bills. The city's noise was constant, from the honking taxis to the sounds of bustling street markets. But inside the small, dimly lit restaurant, Amara's world felt smaller, contained within the clattering of plates and the hum of conversation. Her mother, Ngozi, had been battling a severe illness for months, and with every hospital visit, their financial strain deepened. Amara had spent every naira she earned to keep her mother alive, but the weight of the debt was starting to crush her. She had hoped for a miracle, but with each passing day, the dream of a better life seemed farther away. Amara wasn't the type to complain, but as she wiped down the counters late that evening, she couldn't help but wish for something more. Something to change her life, to lift her from the weight of her responsibilities. The thought of how much easier life could be if she could simply catch a break crossed her mind. She didn't want much, just enough to get by and care for her mother, who had always taught her to be strong and honest, no matter the circumstance. That night, as the last customers filed out of the restaurant, Amara began cleaning up, her mind heavy with the thoughts of the unpaid bills. As she straightened up the dining area, her eyes fell on something on the floor. A sleek black leather briefcase, glimmering in the dim light, caught her attention. It was out of place in the cramped, humble setting of the restaurant. She crouched down to pick it up, the leather smooth beneath her fingertips. The weight of it was significant, but the real curiosity lay in the gold clasp that gleamed under the restaurant's flickering fluorescent lights. Without thinking, she opened it. Inside, the first thing that caught her eye was a stack of documents. But as she pushed them aside, her breath caught when she saw the wallet. Simple, but unmistakably expensive. It had an aura of wealth, the kind of wallet no one in her neighborhood would own. The name on the ID card inside stopped her heart for a moment. Adrian Cole. Adrian Cole. The name echoed in her mind. The CEO of Cole Enterprises. One of the wealthiest men in Nigeria. For a split second, Amara's heart raced with the possibility of what she could do with such a find. Her financial problems, her mother's treatment, it all seemed so close, so easy to solve if she just kept this briefcase. She could take the money, pay the bills, and live a better life. But then she remembered her mother's voice in her head. Amara, always do what's right, even when the world makes it hard. With a deep breath, Amara closed the briefcase. Her decision was made. She would return it. On the other side of Lagos, in a towering glass and steel office building that overlooked the city, Adrian Cole was sitting in his luxurious minimalist office, staring out the window at the sprawling metropolis below. At 38, he was a man who had everything: wealth, power, influence. But for all the money, the luxury cars, and the penthouse apartment, something was missing. Adrian didn't have what most people would consider true happiness. Business was booming, but life outside the office felt empty. He had built his empire from nothing, and now it was unshakable, but with that success came a bitter realization. People only saw his wealth and power, never his humanity. It was hard to trust anyone in his world, and that made him distant, detached. To Adrian, people were often just trying to get something from him, whether it was a business deal, a favor, or money. He had come to expect betrayal. As he sifted through contracts and meetings scheduled for the week, his phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. "Sir, there's a briefcase left at reception with your name on it. Should we bring it to you?" He raised an eyebrow, confused. No one had come by his office recently. Was it another one of those donations people tried to pass off on him? "Bring it up," he responded, his voice cold as he swiped his phone off the desk. A few minutes later, his head of security walked in, holding the briefcase. Adrian glanced at it. Sleek, dark leather, golden latch. Strange, he thought. There was something about it that felt off, almost as though it was a message of some kind. He took it from the security guard, his fingers brushing the leather, and opened it slowly. Inside, the first thing he noticed was the thick stack of paperwork, followed by the wallet. His eyes lingered on the ID card inside. Amara Okafor. The name meant nothing to him, but something about the ordinary-looking wallet with the woman's name on it caught his attention. A frown formed on Adrian's face as he stood up. his mind working. Who is Amara Okafor, he wondered. His instinct kicked in. In a world where people were always looking for a way in, a way to exploit him, this was either a mistake or something far worse. Back at the restaurant, Amara walked the bustling streets of Lagos with a growing sense of unease. The decision she had made earlier to return the briefcase felt right, but her heart still carried a weight. What if no one came looking for it? What if her honesty had been in vain? Her steps quickened as she made her way to the bus stop, but her thoughts were on the briefcase and the powerful man it belonged to. What would he think when she handed it back? Would he even be grateful, or would he look at her like so many others did, just another poor girl looking to take something she hadn't earned? Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from the hospital. "Amara, we need to discuss your mother's condition. Please come to the hospital as soon as possible." A chill ran down her spine. She stopped walking for a moment, her breath shallow. The last few days had been hard, and her mother's health had been deteriorating rapidly. There wasn't much more they could do unless they could afford the proper treatments, which seemed impossible. Amara shoved the phone back in her pocket and began walking again, the weight of her decision and her worries mixing into a heavy fog. As she entered the hospital lobby, her mind remained fixed on one thing: returning the briefcase to its rightful owner. The feeling of doing the right thing kept her grounded. She wasn't sure if it would change anything, but she hoped it would. Little did she know, returning that briefcase would change the course of her life forever. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow over Lagos as Amara stood at the entrance of Coal Enterprises. The building before her loomed like a giant, gleaming glass and steel, reflecting the city's hustle, towering over everything. She had never seen anything like it in her life. The shiny cars parked outside, the polished security guards, the well-dressed employees rushing in and out. It all felt so foreign. She hesitated for a moment, her fingers tightening around the briefcase she held. For a brief second, the temptation to walk away crossed her mind. Maybe no one would ever know, she thought. Maybe I could just keep the briefcase and make a better life for my mother. But then she thought of her mother's teachings, the countless nights spent on the couch together, her mother's voice echoing in her mind. "Amara, always do what's right, even when the world makes it hard." Amara took a deep breath and walked through the automatic doors of the building, the cool air inside offering no comfort to the nerves that buzzed through her body. A sleek receptionist behind a glass desk looked up, raising an eyebrow at the sight of Amara standing in the pristine lobby. "I'm here to return a briefcase," Amara said, her voice shaky but determined. The receptionist gave her a long, assessing look, clearly unsure of what to make of her. Amara's plain dress and simple sneakers stood in sharp contrast to the high-end suits and shoes of the employees passing through the lobby. "Do you have an appointment?" the receptionist asked flatly. "No, I don't," Amara replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "But I found a briefcase, and I believe it belongs to someone here. A Mr. Bajai, Adrian Cole." At the mention of the name, the receptionist's expression faltered, just slightly. She glanced at the briefcase and back at Amara. "Please wait here," she said, her tone suddenly more businesslike. Amara nodded and took a seat, her heart racing in her chest. She hadn't expected this to be easy, but the discomfort she felt being in such a luxurious space only made her feel more out of place. Moments later, a tall security guard entered the lobby, his presence commanding attention. "This way," he instructed, his voice deep and devoid of emotion. Amara followed him down a hallway that seemed to stretch forever, the silence in the building pressing on her, making the walls feel closer with every step. She felt like an intruder, her every step echoing too loudly in the grand, quiet space. The guard stopped at a large, imposing door, knocking twice before opening it. Inside, Adrian Cole stood behind a massive desk, his attention on a set of papers before him. The room exuded wealth, rich leather chairs, dark wood panels, and a view of the sprawling city below. Amara felt small, just standing there. "You're the one who found the briefcase." Adrian's voice was sharp, his eyes meeting hers, sizing her up immediately. "Yes, sir," Amara said, stepping forward and placing the briefcase on the edge of the desk. "I thought it would be best to return it." Adrian's gaze moved from the briefcase to her, his expression hard to read. He picked up the briefcase, examining it with a detached air, as if inspecting a product. He opened it slowly, his eyes scanning the contents. "Why would you bring this to me?" he asked, not looking at her. His voice had a cold edge to it, as if he already had an answer in his mind. "Do you think I'm some sort of fool, bringing me a briefcase in the hope of getting something in return?" Amara's stomach churned. What did he mean? She could feel the judgment in his tone, and it made her throat close up. "No, sir," she replied quietly. "I just wanted to return what wasn't mine. I couldn't keep it. It's the right thing to do." Adrian's eyes flicked to her for the briefest moment. Then, without warning, he closed the briefcase with a sharp snap, standing up from his desk. His tall frame loomed over her, and his presence seemed to fill the room, as if he was used to people cowering before him. "You think you're better than the others who try to steal from me, don't you?" he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "You think I don't know what's going on here? People like you don't come into my office without wanting something. What is it you want? Money? A handout?" Amara's heart sank, and her hands shook slightly. The accusation stung more than she expected. She hadn't come for money. She had come because it was the right thing to do, but it seemed like Adrian wasn't even going to give her a chance to explain. His assumptions about her stung like a slap to the face. "I don't want anything from you, Mr. Cole," she said, trying to steady her voice. "I'm just returning what's yours. I'm not like the others." Adrian stared at her for a long moment, and the silence felt suffocating. His eyes softened just slightly, but then he shook his head, as if shaking off the moment. "I don't believe you," he muttered, turning his back to her and walking to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "You can leave now." Amara's chest tightened, her pride wounded more than she had anticipated. The world around her felt like it was closing in. She had done the right thing, and yet here she was, humiliated in front of one of the most powerful men in Nigeria. She swallowed the lump in her throat and turned to leave, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. As she reached the door, she heard Adrian's voice again, colder than before. "Get out of my office and don't ever come back here." Outside, Amara took a deep breath, blinking back the tears as she walked down the hallway, the weight of Adrian's words heavy in her chest. She couldn't explain what she was feeling. Disappointment, anger, humiliation, confusion. She had just done the right thing, and it had backfired in a way she never could have predicted. Her head throbbed and her thoughts raced. How could someone so powerful be so disconnected from humanity, she wondered, the question echoing in her mind as she walked out of the building, back into the chaotic streets of Lagos. The noise of the city, the chatter of people, the honking of cars, everything seemed to blur around her. The briefcase had felt like a small hope in her life, a hope that was now dashed. Amara had no idea that this moment would not be the end of her story with Adrian Cole. It was just the beginning. The next few days felt like a blur for Amara. She had returned to her routine at the restaurant, but everything seemed different. Her thoughts constantly drifted back to that moment in Adrian Cole's office. His words replayed in her mind, echoing like an unwanted shadow. "I don't believe you." She couldn't understand it. She had been nothing but honest, doing what she believed was right. But in the eyes of a billionaire like Adrian, that didn't seem to matter. She had expected some form of gratitude, maybe a word of thanks, but instead she had been treated like a criminal. It hurt more than she was willing to admit. It wasn't just the humiliation. It was the feeling of being unseen, of being misunderstood, of being judged for doing the right thing. Amara found herself questioning everything. Was this the way of the world? People with power and wealth, so detached from the struggles of ordinary people, would never understand the kind of sacrifice she had made to return that briefcase. The weight of her mother's sickness, the bills piling up, the never-ending pressure to make ends meet. None of that seemed to matter in Adrian's world. He saw her as nothing more than an inconvenience, a poor girl trying to pull a fast one on him. She couldn't shake the anger that simmered inside her. How dare he treat her like that? How dare he question my integrity? She could have kept the briefcase, kept the money. But she didn't. And yet, Adrian had dismissed her like a common thief. At night after her shifts, Amara would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, thoughts swirling around in a chaotic mess. She had done the right thing, hadn't she? She had returned the briefcase without asking for anything in return, and yet she felt so small, so insignificant. The world seemed to reward dishonesty, and those who played by the rules were the ones who suffered. Meanwhile, Adrian Cole was going about his own life, buried in his work, completely unaware of the turmoil he had caused with his cold dismissal. He had barely thought about Amara since their encounter. But that wasn't entirely true. Her words had lingered in his mind more than he cared to admit. "I'm not like the others." That line kept playing over and over in his head, taunting him. It wasn't that Adrian didn't believe in honesty, he just didn't believe it existed outside his circle. People were always looking for a way to get ahead, a way to take advantage of someone like him. He had seen it time and time again, and he had built walls around himself to protect his wealth, his reputation, and his heart. But Amara, with her simple honesty, had pierced through those walls in a way he hadn't expected. It wasn't just her words that bothered him. It was the look in her eyes, the way she had stood her ground despite the humiliation, despite the power he wielded. It made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: guilt. For the first time in a long while, Adrian questioned himself. Had I been too harsh? He had dismissed her without thinking, without understanding her side of the story. But what if she had really just been doing what was right? What if he had misjudged her completely? The thought gnawed at him. It didn't help that every time he glanced at the wallet, his mind kept returning to her name. Amara Okafor. It had been a week since the encounter, and yet he couldn't seem to let go of the feeling that he had done something wrong. He paced his office, frustration building inside him. He hated this feeling of vulnerability, this self-doubt. It wasn't supposed to be this way. He was Adrian Cole. Nothing and no one could shake him. But Amara had managed to do just that. What is it about her? He wondered, clenching his jaw. Back at the restaurant, Amara's resistance to her own emotions continued. She buried herself in work, her focus on the endless cycle of customers, cleaning and serving, but there was no escaping the thought of Adrian and the briefcase. She would be lying if she said she didn't wonder what could have been. Every time she saw a customer leaving a generous tip, or when she overheard people talking about their luxurious lives, a pang of longing shot through her chest. She wanted more for herself and her mother. She deserved more. But how could she ever achieve that when the world was built on deceit and power? She thought of the briefcase again, the one decision that had cost her more than she had expected. I should have kept it, she thought bitterly. Maybe then things would be different. Maybe I could afford the treatment my mother needs, and we could stop living from one day to the next. But deep down, she knew it wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money. Her mother had always taught her that integrity was more important than anything else. Still, Amara couldn't help but feel defeated. There was no way to fight a system that was built against her. She couldn't even keep a briefcase without being treated like a criminal. What hope did she have of ever changing her life? Adrian sat alone in his penthouse that evening, his mind still occupied with Amara. He had tried to push her out of his thoughts, to return to his usual routine of business and luxury. But he couldn't. The guilt weighed on him like a heavy chain, and the longer he ignored it, the heavier it became. He found himself standing by the window again, looking out over the city. The lights of Lagos twinkled below, but the view felt emptier than it ever had before. He had everything a man could want: money, power, influence. But it didn't mean anything if he couldn't even trust his own instincts anymore. If he couldn't even tell when he was wrong. Adrian pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in a long time. "Titi," he said when his assistant answered, "I need to make things right. Find out where Amara Okafor is. I need to apologize." The following day, Amara had just finished her shift at the restaurant when she saw Titi, Adrian Cole's assistant, standing in the doorway. For a moment, she thought she was imagining things. What was someone from Cole Enterprises doing here? Titi was impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit that looked more expensive than anything Amara had ever owned. She carried herself with an air of authority as she approached Amara, her eyes scanning the humble setting of the restaurant before finally locking onto her. "Amara Okafor?" Titi asked, her voice polite yet firm. Amara froze. Her pulse quickened, and the small nagging doubt from earlier resurfaced. What now? Had she been followed? Was this some sort of trap? She tried to keep her face neutral, but the emotions swirling inside her made it hard to mask the unease. Yes, Amara replied cautiously. Titi smiled, though it was more a polite gesture than one of warmth. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Adrian Cole. He wants to speak with you. He's asked that you meet him at his office tomorrow morning. There's something he wishes to discuss. Amara's heart skipped a beat. She had expected him to forget about her or dismiss her, not call her back. Why would he want to speak to me now? She stared at Titi, trying to read her expression. I don't understand, Amara said, her voice trembling. Why would Mr. Cole want to talk to me? After everything that happened. Titi's smile softened slightly, as if she understood the weight behind Amara's words. Mr. Cole regrets the way things went last time. He'd like to apologize and explain himself. He was mistaken about you. The words felt like a punch to Amara's chest. He regrets? She could hardly believe it. The humiliation she'd felt in his office, the accusations, the dismissal. She had never imagined he'd want to revisit it. Yet there it was. But what did he want from her now? I see, Amara said, her mind racing. I'll be there. The next morning, Amara stood before the towering building of Cole Enterprises again, this time with a completely different set of emotions. Gone was the anger and frustration that had followed her for days. Now she was filled with uncertainty. What would Adrian Cole want from her now? As she entered the building, the familiar sterile environment felt even more intimidating than before. The polished floors, the sleek design, it all felt like a world meant for someone much more important than herself. I don't belong here, she thought, swallowing hard. She was escorted through the same long hallways, past the same expensive paintings on the walls, and finally led to a door that opened to Adrian Cole's office. He stood by the window staring out at the city below, his posture rigid. Amara, he said, his voice softer than she expected. Come in. Amara stepped inside, her eyes moving nervously over the room. Adrian gestured toward a chair, inviting her to sit, but Amara hesitated for a moment, unsure of her place. Was this truly an apology? Or was this some kind of trick? Please sit, Adrian repeated, his tone no longer cold, but not exactly warm either. His usual confident, commanding demeanor was now tempered with something more vulnerable. Amara took a seat, her eyes flickering toward the briefcase she had returned, now sitting neatly on his desk. Adrian followed her gaze, then locked eyes with her once more. I owe you an apology, he said, his voice steady but filled with an earnestness that caught Amara off guard. When you came to my office that day, I treated you unfairly. I made assumptions about you without knowing anything about your life, your struggles, or your intentions. And for that, I am truly sorry. Amara sat frozen, her mind scrambling to process his words. Is this real? It didn't seem possible. This was the same Adrian Cole who had dismissed her with such arrogance, who had accused her of trying to steal from him without a second thought. But here he was, admitting his mistake, and in that moment she felt something shift. A strange, unexpected feeling of relief. Thank you, she said softly, her voice wavering slightly. I appreciate your apology. Adrian nodded, his expression serious. I want to make it right. You did something that most people in my world would never do. You acted with integrity when you didn't have to. And that means something. He paused, standing from his desk and moving towards a drawer. He pulled out a checkbook and began writing something. Amara watched him, confused. What was this about? He slid the check across the desk to her. I know it's not much, but I want to give you something. For your honesty. He pushed the check toward her, and Amara looked down at the number written on it. 500,000 Nigerian naira. Her heart skipped a beat. The money was more than she had ever seen in one place, more than she could even imagine spending. It could pay off her mother's bills, take care of her education, give them both a chance at a better life. And yet, something held her back. I can't accept this, Amara said, her voice shaking. I didn't return the briefcase for money. I did it because it was the right thing to do. This, she gestured to the check, isn't why I did it. Adrian's face softened, and he leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing slightly as if contemplating her words. "I understand," he said after a long pause, "but you deserve something for your honesty, something more than just a thank you. Please, take it. Use it however you see fit." Amara stared at the check for a long moment. She could feel the weight of it, the weight of the life it promised, but her pride, her mother's teachings, held her steady. "I appreciate the gesture," she said, shaking her head, "but I can't take it." Adrian was silent for a few moments, as though processing her refusal. He studied her, almost as if seeing her for the first time. Finally, he nodded slowly. "I respect that," he said quietly, "but I still feel that you deserve something. I won't force you to take the money, but let me make another offer. I want to start a foundation, the Grace Foundation. It will be a scholarship fund for young women from backgrounds like yours. Women who have the integrity to do what's right, no matter the cost." Amara blinked in surprise. "A foundation?" Adrian smiled, a more genuine smile this time. "Yes, a foundation that will help those who might not have the chance otherwise. And Amara," he continued, "I want you to be the first beneficiary. Your story inspired me more than I can explain." The days that followed the meeting in Adrian Cole's office felt like a whirlwind for Amara. After her encounter with him, everything seemed to move too quickly, too intensely. The idea of a scholarship, something she had never even dreamed of, was now a possibility. Yet as much as she tried to focus on the future, a part of her couldn't stop reflecting on the past. She had always known that this city, this life, wasn't meant for her. Lagos was a city of dreams, but it was also a city where the weight of reality could crush you in an instant. Amara had seen too many people who got caught in the grind, never able to break free. She wasn't sure how long she could keep up with the double life she was living, waiting tables by day, caring for her ailing mother by night. That evening, after yet another tiring shift at the restaurant, Amara stood by her mother's bedside, the soft beeping of the machines the only sound in the otherwise quiet room. The sterile hospital room was a stark contrast to the warmth of the home they had once shared. A home filled with love, laughter, and the smell of her mother's cooking. But that had all changed when her mother's illness had worsened. Ngozi, her mother, lay asleep, her face pale and frail. The woman who had always been her rock, strong, unshakable, now seemed so vulnerable. Amara reached out and gently touched her mother's hand, feeling the coldness in her fingers. As she sat by her side, she remembered the days when she was a little girl, playing in the streets with her friends while her mother would be at the market, always so busy, but never too busy to stop and listen to her. Amara's mind wandered back to a time when life had seemed simpler, when she didn't have to worry about bills or illness or losing her mother. The words her mother had once spoken to her echoed in her mind. "Amara, always do what's right, even when it's hard. Always keep your integrity, no matter what. It will keep you grounded, even when the world tries to break you." Those words had guided her through countless challenges, and now, sitting in this sterile room, Amara couldn't help but wonder if that integrity, that moral compass her mother had instilled in her, would ever be enough to change her circumstances. Could one good choice really change everything? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone vibrating on the nightstand. She picked it up, and the name on the screen took her by surprise. It was Titi, Adrian's assistant. "Amara?" Titi's voice was warmer than before, more genuine. "I hope I'm not disturbing you, but Mr. Cole would like to meet again. He has something important to discuss with you." Amara felt her heart race. After their last meeting, she'd expected to never hear from him again. What could he possibly want now? "I'm listening," Amara said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the excitement that bubbled up inside her. "Mr. Cole wants to personally apologize for the way he treated you before," Titi explained, "and he has a proposal. He would like to establish the Grace Foundation, a scholarship program for young women in need, and he wants you to be its first beneficiary." The words hit her like a wave. Amara couldn't quite process what she was hearing. A scholarship. "Me?" Titi continued. "Mr. Cole is very serious about this. He believes your story deserves to be shared, and he wants to make sure you have every opportunity to succeed. It's his way of showing his gratitude for your honesty. Amara felt the lump in her throat grow. She had come from a life of hardship and sacrifice, and now the possibility of a future she had only dreamed of seemed within reach. The weight of her mother's illness, the fear of never being able to pay for her treatment, it all suddenly felt like it might not be as insurmountable as it once seemed. I don't know what to say, Amara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't have to say anything right now, Titi said gently. Mr. Cole just wants to meet with you again, to explain everything in person. He's truly sorry for the way things went the last time. He wants to make things right. Amara sat quietly for a moment, the weight of Titi's words sinking in. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't about handouts. This was about something bigger, something that could change her life forever. I'll be there, Amara finally said, her voice firm. Thank you, Titi. The following afternoon, Amara stood outside the towering glass building of Cole Enterprises once again. This time, however, she didn't feel the same unease. Instead, there was a strange sense of hope that buoyed her forward. When she entered the building, she was escorted to a private conference room where Adrian Cole stood waiting, looking every bit the wealthy, powerful businessman she had seen on TV. But today, his demeanor was different, softer, more sincere. Amara, he greeted her, his voice warmer than before. Thank you for coming. Please sit. Amara hesitated for just a moment before sitting down. She noticed the slight difference in Adrian's posture. He wasn't as guarded as before. There was a vulnerability in his eyes, a hint of something real that she hadn't seen in their previous interactions. I know I've wronged you, Adrian began, his voice serious, and I can't undo what I did. But I want to do something meaningful. Your honesty, it wasn't just rare, it was exceptional. And I've realized that there's something I can do to make up for my mistake. Amara listened, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and hope. Could it be? Could he really be offering her something real? I want to create the Grace Foundation, Adrian continued, a foundation to help young women who, like you, have the strength to do what's right, even when no one is looking. And I want you to be the first recipient. Amara blinked, her mind racing. This wasn't just about her future, it was about her mother's future too. The money for her medical bills, the chance for a better life, for both of them. It all seemed too much to believe. Could this be real? Adrian's eyes softened as he saw the confusion in her face. Amara, I understand this is a lot to take in. But I believe in you. I believe in your potential. You don't need to struggle anymore. You deserve a chance to succeed. The days that followed Adrian Cole's offer to Amara were filled with a strange sense of disbelief. Amara had gone from feeling like a small, insignificant waitress in the bustling streets of Lagos to becoming the beneficiary of something far greater than she ever could have imagined. The idea of the Grace Foundation felt unreal, like a dream she couldn't quite touch. Every time she thought about it, her heart raced with a mix of gratitude, uncertainty, and fear. Was she truly worthy of this opportunity? Adrian had promised that the foundation would be launched soon, and that he wanted to meet her regularly to discuss the details. But as the days went on, Amara's feelings toward Adrian began to shift. Gone was the cold, cynical man who had accused her of trying to steal from him. The man who stood before her now was softer, more vulnerable. It was as though the walls he had so carefully built around himself were starting to crumble, and she could see, for the first time, the human beneath the wealth and power. Amara found herself visiting his office more frequently. Each meeting was an opportunity to see a new side of Adrian, a side that wasn't about business or money, but about someone who had been lonely and disconnected from the world for far too long. She could tell that he wasn't used to sharing himself with anyone. And yet, little by little, he was opening up to her. One evening, after a long meeting about the foundation, Adrian invited Amara to dinner. The invitation felt oddly casual for someone of his stature, and Amara, hesitant at first, agreed. They met at a quiet upscale restaurant. The dim lighting and soft music created an intimate atmosphere, a stark contrast to the cold, clinical feel of the business meetings. Amara arrived early, and when Adrian walked in, she noticed the change in him. His usual polished demeanor was replaced by something more relaxed. He wasn't wearing his usual business suit, but rather a simple, well-fitted shirt and jeans. "Amara, you look wonderful," he said, his tone warm as he greeted her. His eyes softened as he took in her presence. Amara, feeling self-conscious, smiled shyly, her nerves a bit more relaxed than usual. "Thank you," she said, a bit taken aback by the genuine warmth in his voice. The discomfort she had felt in his office started to melt away, and for the first time, she felt like they were just two people sitting across from each other, not a billionaire and a waitress, but simply two humans. As the evening went on, their conversation flowed effortlessly. They talked about everything: her childhood, her dreams of a better future for herself and her mother, and the pain of watching her mother struggle with illness. Adrian listened intently, his eyes never leaving hers. He wasn't distracted by his phone, nor was he looking around the room as he often did in meetings. For the first time, he seemed truly present. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like to live a life that isn't defined by money?" Amara asked, her voice quiet but filled with sincerity. Adrian looked down at his wineglass for a moment, as if considering her question. "I don't know. I've been so focused on building my empire that I forgot what it was like to just live, to feel connected to people, to care about something outside of business." His voice softened, and for a moment he looked vulnerable, a stark contrast to the powerful businessman she had first met. "I think you've always had the capacity for kindness," Amara said gently. "It just got buried under everything else. I see it now, in how you're helping me, how you're giving other young women like me a chance." Adrian looked up at her, his gaze holding a depth she hadn't seen before. "Maybe. But I didn't understand what I was missing until you showed me. You've taught me more about myself in these last few days than I ever thought possible." For a moment they sat in silence, their eyes locked. Amara felt the weight of her own emotions shift as she looked at him. She had never expected to form a connection with someone like Adrian, a man who seemed so far removed from her world. But here they were, two people from entirely different backgrounds, sharing something real. Adrian broke the silence, his voice soft but firm. "I want you to know that the Grace Foundation isn't just about scholarships or financial support. It's about giving women like you the chance to change the world. It's about proving that someone can come from nothing and still make something of themselves. You've shown me that, Amara." Her heart swelled with emotion, a lump forming in her throat. "I never thought I'd be the one to change anything," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I thought I was just one of the many people struggling, invisible to the world. But now I can see that there's more for me. There's more for my mother." "You're not invisible, Amara," Adrian said, his voice steady, his words carrying the weight of a promise. "You've shown me what true strength looks like, and that's something I never want to forget." The evening went on, and the connection between them grew stronger. There was no pretense, no expectations, just two people talking, sharing, and understanding one another on a level that was rare in both of their worlds. The following weeks saw Amara's life begin to shift. With the foundation officially launched, Amara was the first recipient of its scholarship. She enrolled in a new university program, her dreams of becoming a healthcare professional more tangible than ever. But it wasn't just the scholarship that changed her life. It was the steady, unwavering support of Adrian. He checked in on her progress regularly, ensuring that she had everything she needed. It wasn't about money, it was about opportunity, and Adrian was determined to give her that. As Amara flourished in her studies, Adrian's transformation continued. He began to spend more time outside of his company, investing in the people around him. The foundation became a beacon for those who had long been overlooked, and Adrian's involvement in it became his life's new purpose. One evening, Adrian and Amara sat in the quiet office of the Grace Foundation, reviewing applications from potential scholarship recipients. Amara looked over at him, noticing the subtle smile playing on his lips as he focused on the papers in front of him. She realized in that moment how much had changed, not just for her, but for him too. "Adrian," Amara said softly, her voice filled with quiet gratitude. "I'm really glad I met you. You've helped me believe in something bigger than just survival." Adrian paused, his gaze softening as he looked at her. And you've helped me remember that there's more to life than just money and power, he said. Sometimes it's the simplest things that can change everything. Amara smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace settle over her. She had never imagined that one decision, one act of honesty, would lead to this. A new life, not just for her, but for so many others. The foundation was more than just a scholarship. It was a symbol of the power of integrity, compassion, and the willingness to take the right path, no matter the cost. Amara stood in front of the small, modest apartment she called home, her fingers hesitating over the door handle. She had just come from the university, where she had been excelling in her courses thanks to the scholarship from the Grace Foundation. Life had been moving forward, slowly but surely. With Adrian's guidance and support, everything was falling into place. Except for one thing. Her mother's health was not improving. Amara had spent countless hours at the hospital, watching her mother's condition worsen with each passing day. The medical bills piled up, and the strain of trying to balance her studies, her job, and her caregiving responsibilities was beginning to take its toll. Every time she tried to speak to Adrian about it, he seemed so wrapped up in the foundation, so determined to make a difference in the lives of others, that she couldn't bring herself to ask him for more help. She didn't want to burden him. The truth was, she had never expected Adrian to become so involved in her life, let alone become the anchor that he had become. His presence was a constant source of support, but she couldn't help but feel the growing tension between her own needs and his overwhelming generosity. She opened the door and stepped inside, the familiar smell of hospital medications and the sterile clinical air surrounding her. Her mother, Ngozi, lay on the couch, looking frail and fragile, her once vibrant face now pale and drawn. Amara had just spoken to the doctors earlier in the day. They had told her that without further treatment, her mother's chances of recovery were slim. Tears welled up in Amara's eyes as she sat down next to her mother, her hand gently brushing the older woman's hair away from her forehead. "I've tried everything," Amara thought, her heart heavy with guilt. "But it's never enough." Meanwhile, in his towering office at Cole Enterprises, Adrian was pacing. A storm of frustration and uncertainty swirling in his mind. The foundation had grown beyond his expectations, and he was proud of the work they were doing. Yet something felt off. The progress was moving too quickly, and the more he tried to control it, the more he felt like he was losing grip. His phone buzzed. It was a message from his business partner, Michael. "The new project proposal is ready for review. It's urgent." Adrian groaned, knowing that he couldn't keep delaying the meeting. But there was something more pressing in his mind. Ever since he and Amara had started working together, he'd felt a deep connection to her, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. But as much as he wanted to reach out to her, to help her beyond the foundation, he couldn't bring himself to ask what she truly needed. Was it money? Was it my help with her mother? He had tried to be the supportive mentor, but the distance between them felt wider with each passing day. His inner turmoil, his desire to do more for Amara, to fix everything in her life, was eating away at him. Yet at the same time, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she was pulling away. He wasn't sure if it was because of her pride or something else, but whatever it was, it made him feel helpless. He thought back to the last time they'd spoken. They'd met in a quiet cafe after one of her classes, and the conversation had been pleasant enough. But something had shifted. She had been distant, closed off even. Adrian had tried to broach the topic of her mother's health, but Amara had quickly changed the subject. That was the moment he began to feel like he was losing her. Was she shutting me out? The frustration built up, and Adrian could no longer ignore the fact that he was deeply affected by his feelings for her. He wanted to do more for her, much more. But what could he do? What right did he have to intrude on her personal life? Was he even doing enough? His phone buzzed again, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was Titi, his assistant. "Mr. Cole, there's a matter that requires your immediate attention. It's about the foundation," Amara called. Adrian's pulse quickened. He had barely spoken to Amara since that last meeting. Why was she calling now? Something told him that whatever it wasn't good. He grabbed his coat and rushed out of the office, leaving his unfinished thoughts behind. Amara's phone buzzed as she sat by her mother's side, lost in her thoughts. She looked at the screen and saw that it was Adrian. She had almost forgotten that she had called him earlier in a moment of weakness, when the weight of everything had become too much to bear. She had tried to hide her emotions from him, not wanting to seem weak or needy. But the truth was, she couldn't do it alone anymore. Her fingers trembled as she swiped to answer. "Amara," Adrian's voice came through, warm but filled with concern. "I'm sorry I didn't get back to you sooner. What happened? Is everything okay?" The words caught in her throat, and Amara's chest tightened. She could hear the sincerity in his voice, but she didn't know how to respond. She had wanted to tell him everything. The mounting medical bills, the long nights spent watching her mother struggle, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. She was afraid of burdening him, afraid of seeming weak. I'm not sure how to explain it," Amara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My mother's condition is getting worse. The doctors say there's not much more they can do." Adrian's silence on the other end was deafening. She could almost feel his thoughts swirling. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he spoke. "I'm coming over," he said, his voice firm with determination. "I'll be there in an hour." Amara's heart skipped a beat. He's coming here. She had never expected him to show up at her apartment, much less to face her mother's illness. There was no turning back now, the vulnerability she had been avoiding, the emotions she had been holding inside. Everything was about to spill over. When Adrian arrived at her apartment, Amara was standing by her mother's side, trying to hide the tears that had welled up in her eyes. Her mother's shallow breathing seemed to fill the room, and Amara fought to stay composed. Adrian knocked softly on the door before entering, his presence larger than life in the small apartment. He looked at her, his face softening as he took in the scene. He could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weariness in her posture. He had been so focused on the foundation, so driven by his desire to make things right for her, that he hadn't truly seen what was going on. "Amara," he said softly, taking a step toward her. "I'm so sorry. You don't have to do this alone." Amara looked up at him, her eyes filled with unshed tears. She wanted to say something, to thank him for his kindness, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she let out a breathless sob, finally allowing herself to cry in front of him. Adrian stood by her side, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. It wasn't just pity or sympathy he felt in that moment, it was something deeper, a sense of connection, a desire to help, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. "I'm here for you," he said, his voice steady and filled with a promise. "We'll get through this together." The days following Adrian's visit were a blur of emotions for Amara. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to lean on someone. Adrian's presence in her life, so unexpected, so overwhelming, had shifted the trajectory of everything she had known. She had been cautious with her feelings, holding back, afraid to believe that anything good could come from someone so wealthy, so powerful. Yet here he was, standing by her side when she had nothing left to give. But now, as the days passed, the weight of everything began to settle in. She had always been fiercely independent, never allowing anyone to get too close. She had built walls around her heart, determined to protect herself and her mother. But with Adrian, those walls felt like they were crumbling piece by piece. It was both a relief and a terrifying feeling. Amara sat at her mother's bedside, the hum of the hospital machines filling the otherwise quiet room. Her thoughts were tangled. What if Adrian is offering help because of pity? What if this is all just charity to him? Her mother's condition was worsening. Amara could feel it, like an invisible weight pressing down on her chest. The doctors had suggested another round of treatments, but without a guarantee that it would make a difference, the cost was almost impossible to afford. Each day felt like a race against time. The phone on the bedside table buzzed, snapping Amara out of her thoughts. She looked down at the screen and saw Adrian's name flashing. Her heart skipped a beat. "Amara," Adrian's voice came through the phone, steady and calm. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation the other day. I know you're trying to handle everything on your own, but I want to help. I've already spoken to the hospital about your mother's treatment. The foundation will cover all of her medical bills, and I want to make sure you have everything you need." Amara's breath caught in her throat. "He's willing to do that?" No, she replied quickly, the word coming out before she could stop herself. I appreciate everything you've done, Adrian, but I can't accept your charity. This is my responsibility, not yours. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Amara could hear the quiet sound of Adrian breathing, the tension between them palpable. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and filled with something unexpected. Frustration, maybe, or perhaps a deeper sense of concern. Amara, he said, why are you pushing me away? Why do you insist on carrying all of this by yourself? I care about you. I care about what happens to your mother, to you. Amara's heart thudded in her chest. She had always felt like she had to carry the weight of everything alone, that no one would ever truly understand. But Adrian had seen her, really seen her, in a way that few people had. And still, she hesitated. She didn't want to let herself depend on anyone. What if I let him in and he leaves? What if he's just like everyone else, looking to take advantage of me? She closed her eyes, feeling the walls she had so carefully built around herself begin to shake. She wanted to accept his help. She wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't like everyone else. But the fear, the self-doubt, it held her back. I don't know how to accept help, she whispered, her voice trembling. I've never had anyone to rely on before. I don't know how to let you in. On the other end of the line, Adrian's voice softened, the irritation fading away. I'm not asking you to give up your independence, Amara. I'm asking you to let me help, because I want to. And I won't stop offering, not until you let me. Amara felt her chest tighten as the weight of his words sank in. She wanted to pull away, to shut down, to run from the emotions that had started to stir inside her. But deep down, a part of her longed for something more, something real, something that didn't come with strings attached, or the expectation of repayment. You don't have to do this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I want to, Adrian replied firmly, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm here, Amara. I'll be here for you, if you'll let me. Amara sat silently for a moment, the words swirling in her mind. It was one of the hardest decisions she had ever made. Could she trust him? Could she trust herself to accept the kind of help that came with no strings, no expectations? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. Okay, she said softly, the words almost foreign on her tongue. Okay, I'll let you help, but only for my mother. There was a long pause before Adrian responded, his voice gentle but filled with relief. I'm here, Amara. You don't have to carry this alone. Days passed, and with each moment, Amara felt the tension in her chest begin to ease. Adrian kept his word. He had arranged for her mother's treatment to be fully covered by the foundation, and he checked in regularly to make sure everything was going smoothly. But as much as Amara was grateful for his support, a part of her still struggled to accept it. She had always believed that people only helped out of obligation, out of guilt, or to get something in return. Adrian was different, though. His actions spoke of a sincerity she hadn't seen in a long time. Every time he reached out, it wasn't because he was expecting anything in return. It was because he truly cared. And still there was a fear within her, a fear that perhaps eventually he would grow tired of helping her, of supporting her. She wasn't used to being the one who received, only the one who gave. One evening, as they sat together in the hospital waiting room, Adrian turned to Amara, his gaze soft and steady. You don't have to keep fighting alone, he said quietly. Not anymore. I'm here for you, Amara, for however long it takes. Amara looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of vulnerability and hope. She had spent so long protecting herself, building walls, but now she was beginning to realize that maybe it was okay to let someone else in. Maybe it was okay to let someone else carry some of the burden. I don't know if I can ever repay you, Amara said, her voice barely audible. But I promise, I'll never forget this. Adrian smiled softly, a warmth in his eyes that Amara hadn't expected. You don't have to repay me, Amara. You've already done more than enough. You've shown me what it means to have integrity, to care about something bigger than yourself. For the first time in what felt like forever, Amara allowed herself to feel something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. The hospital corridors were quieter than usual. The soft beeping of machines and the murmur of distant voices were the only sounds that accompanied Amara as she walked toward her mother's room. Her footsteps felt lighter than they had in days, the heavy weight of doubt and fear lifting off her shoulders with every step she took. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't walking alone. Adrian had been by her side every day since they had agreed to work together. He had made sure her mother's treatment was taken care of, arranged the financial support through the foundation, and checked in with her more than she could have ever expected. He wasn't just offering her help out of obligation, he genuinely cared. He had shown her that there was more to life than survival. There was a chance for something better, something lasting, if she could only learn to trust and accept it. Amara opened the door to her mother's room, where Ngozi lay, still weak but no longer looking as fragile. The treatments were working, and for the first time in months, Amara could see a glimmer of hope in her mother's eyes. "Amara," her mother whispered, a faint smile forming on her lips as she saw her daughter. "You've been working too hard, my child. You need to rest." Amara sat beside her mother, her heart full. The stress that had clouded her thoughts for so long was finally starting to dissipate. With Adrian's help, Amara was able to focus on what truly mattered: her mother's health, her education, and the future she had long ago written off as impossible. That evening, as Amara sat beside her mother, she couldn't help but think of everything that had brought her here. It had all started with that one decision to return the briefcase. To do what was right, even when the world told her not to. But it hadn't just been the briefcase, it had been the connection she had formed with Adrian. He wasn't just a wealthy businessman, he had become her ally, her friend, and perhaps, in some quiet corner of her heart, someone she was beginning to care for deeply. Amara's thoughts were interrupted when she heard a knock at the door. She looked up, her heart skipping a beat as she saw Adrian standing in the doorway, his usual confident demeanor softened by a warmth that only seemed to appear when he was with her. "I brought you something," Adrian said, a slight smile playing at the corner of his mouth. He stepped inside, holding a small bouquet of flowers, bright, vibrant, and cheerful. Amara couldn't help but smile as he handed them to her. It wasn't the grand gestures or the expensive gifts that made her heart swell. It was the thought behind them, the understanding, the kindness. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. Adrian nodded, his eyes locking with hers. "How's she doing?" he asked, looking over at Amara's mother. "Much better," Amara replied, her voice breaking slightly. "Thanks to you." Adrian didn't respond with more words. Instead, he simply walked over to the bed and gently shook her mother's hand, offering her a warm smile. "I'm glad to see you're doing better." "And I meant what I said, Amara," he added, turning back to her, his expression sincere. "You and your mother deserve every opportunity. I'll continue supporting you, no matter what." The sincerity in his voice, the unwavering commitment in his eyes, it was a promise. It wasn't just about the money, the scholarships, or the foundation. It was about something deeper. Adrian wasn't just offering help. He was offering a chance at a new beginning. Not just for Amara, but for her mother too. Amara felt a lump in her throat, but she managed to swallow it down. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. This has changed everything. You've changed everything." "I didn't do it alone," Adrian replied quietly. "You taught me more than you know. You taught me what it means to live with integrity, to care about people beyond myself." Amara's heart fluttered at his words. She had never thought of herself as someone who could make such an impact, especially not on someone as powerful as Adrian. But she had. And in doing so, she had changed not just her life, but his as well. With a deep breath, Amara stood up and walked over to Adrian. Her heart was full, and for the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid of what the future might bring. She had come so far, farther than she ever thought possible. "Thank you, Adrian," she said softly, looking up at him with a newfound confidence, not just for the help, but for reminding me that there's more to life than just surviving. Adrian smiled warmly, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer. "You've earned this, Amara. You deserve all the good that's coming your way." The air in the room shifted, as if the weight of all their past moments, of pain, struggle, and uncertainty, had been lifted. It wasn't just about money or the scholarship or the foundation. It was about something deeper, a shared understanding, a bond forged through hardship, trust, and integrity. As Adrian left the room that evening, Amara sat by her mother's side once again, her heart at peace. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future, one where she wasn't just surviving, but thriving. And as she looked down at the flowers Adrian had given her, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the choices she had made. The choice to be honest, the choice to trust, and the choice to open her heart. It was a new beginning. Not just for her and her mother, but for Adrian as well. Together, they had created something that would change many lives, just as it had changed their own. Amara smiled, her heart light. Maybe one good choice could change everything after all. What did you take away from Amara and Adrian's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your insights could help someone else understand the true power of integrity, kindness, and human connection. If stories like this move you, make sure to follow our channel for more heart-stirring journeys that show how one choice can transform everything. Thank you for sticking with Amara and Adrian's story until the very end. I hope it inspired you as much as it did them. We've got many more unforgettable tales waiting for you, so go ahead. Click the next video on your screen and get ready to experience another emotional journey. Trust me, you don't want to miss it.